Charities of the Rio Grande Valley. Sister Norma is beloved by so many and is known as the Pope's, I don't know, Pope Francis has really seen the work that she's done on the ground there and has recognized her work among working with refugees and immigrants to the United States. She has really gained an international spotlight for the work she's been doing and for speaking out against the Trump administration's family separation policy. Sister Pimentel was selected to receive the Latere Medal by the University of Notre Dame in recognition of her outstanding service to the Catholic Church and society in May 2018. And I can personally attest to the amazing work that Sister's doing on the ground daily to be there for the families, the many families and children that she sees, both at Catholic Charities Respite Center and now on the Mexico side. So with that, I'm gonna open it up for Sister to begin, and then I'll introduce each panelist as your time comes up. So gracias, Sister Norma, por estar aquí, and we'd love to start hearing from you, Sister Norma. Una introducción.
Thank you, Belinda. Muchas gracias a todos. Es un placer estar con ustedes and have the opportunity to share my thoughts on what is happening at the border. And today, the families at the refugee camp in Matamoros are demoralized. It has been over a year that they have been waiting, hopeful that someday they could enter the United States. Unfortunately, the asylum process established at the border as a result of MPP has been another form of deterrence for the families to enter the United States. It is evidently a means to discourage and break their spirits, which at this point has been successful doing just that. Many of the women are broken to the point that out of desperation and hopelessness have wanted to throw themselves into the river and drown. Women have voiced that they are so afraid, even to sleep at night, out of fear that someone can come into their tent and harm them. Recently, a mother shared with me that someone came into her tent while she was sleeping with her little girl. When she woke up, she noticed that things were missing, a lot of things. Immediately, she feared for the life of her child that could have been taken, and to her relief, she wasn't. Unfortunately, many others have gone missing, and they just never hear from them again. The stories of abuses and violations at the camp are so many, and yet they're so afraid to say who or to point at who could it be. It is out of fear for their lives and that of their children. They just want it to stop. They want nothing to go, they just don't want to go back home because they know it's a sure death. And in any other country would be not safe. And they only want to be able to enter the United States where they believe they will be safe. These abuses that are not being corrected and showing abundance of things. They don't want us to bombard them with so many wonderful things. They want just to be helped out of this inferno that they are in right now. The efforts to end MPP, the solution is the only thing that they think they need. MPP, by forcing families to remain in Mexico, contribute to criminal activities. They are destroying the families beyond what we saw with the separation of children. It is the most perfect deterrence policy established by this administration because it has successfully stopped families from entering the United States at the expense of the dignity and the well-being of thousands of refugees who are continually enduring human suffering. And because it is ours out of sight, it is out of mind, and therefore not my problem. The United States doesn't even have to feel bad about it. The fact remains that the United States is the sole responsible for such atrocities that are happening to thousands of families at the border. We have failed humanity because we have failed to stop policies that are breaking the human soul. Let us stop the humanity and the policies that destroy life. Let us stop MPP. Thank you.
Sister Norma, thank you so much for speaking out and being there. And I know that just seeing you here with the other speakers, it's a very emotional time because Sister Norma has been seeing this for so long, right, Sister? And now for a year on the Mexico side. And for those that are on the front lines, this is very emotional to see our fellow families, people just like you and me, children, mothers, fathers, tios, tias, abuelos, suffering just like you and I. And so to be there and be able to say that this is breaking the human soul, sister, it is. And thank you for being with us today to share this story. I really appreciate that so much. We have now Lily Ray. Lily Ray is founder of the Bay Area Border Relief, and as a community activist, she has years of volunteer experience focused on protecting and restoring the rights of women. A political fundraiser as well, Lily is on the board of Protect Our Defenders, the only national organization solely dedicated to ending military sexual assault. 2 years ago, outraged by the family separation policy, Lily traveled to South Texas border with a small group of like-minded people, and shortly after founded the Bay Area Border Relief. We've made 7 trips to the border, bringing supplies and support from volunteers from all backgrounds, and the BABR continues to support asylum seekers here in the U.S. as well as those stuck in Matamoros under the cruel Migration Protection Protocol's policy. Thank you, Lily, for being here, and please introduce your thoughts as well to the group.
Thank you, Belinda, and thank you all for being here. It's so inspiring to see so many like-minded people with such huge hearts who are here and who want to hear from everyone who's involved in one way or another, because we're all part of this. Inspired by the Margaret Mead quote, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." A small group of us did go to the South Texas border in McAllen, Texas. It was June of 2018, and we called ourselves the McAllen 12. That's when we met Sister Norma there, and we worked in the respite center for just a short period. And when we came home, we were connected with Belinda Arriaga, and that's when Bay Area Border Relief took off. And we've been to the border 7 times now, 3 times with a 25-foot truck full of donations, and bringing them across the bridge to Matamoros is no small feat, because you do that in wagons. It's very complicated to come across in a vehicle. And now, as things have gotten progressively worse and shut down, it's what I would give to be able to be there right now with our wagons and items to bring across. It's so cruel. It's gotten worse every single day. And most recently, 2 weeks ago with the hurricane, it's already living hell. And then you add the hurricane with its fear of rising waters, and then that finally backs off. And then there's more mosquitoes than anybody knows what to do with. So the life is just, it's horrific. And as I always say, if these people could go home, they would. This is not a camping experiment. This is their lives, and they deserve what international law allows, which is to seek asylum. So Bay Area Border Relief, in our 7 trips, we have over 60 people who are in our organization now who now continue to help from afar. And we are part of the collaborative that is the Dignity Village Collaborative, that is a group of NGOs there at the border. And at this point now, it's hard to not be there, but we send our love and our prayers and our thoughts. And a lot of the Bay Area Border Relief people are in touch with people at the camp, because they're human beings like everyone on this call, who need just like everyone on this call needs. And to hear the stories, the cruelty, the lack of humanity, just makes everyone's skin crawl. So, but we didn't want to just sit back and wring our hands. So we continue to raise money, and we continue to help in many, many ways. We help provide water. We recently helped provide money to pay for the repellent, as well as the fumigation that's going on, to make what's already horrible living there just a little bit more bearable, to not have to be smacking mosquitoes, and to see the bites on some of the little legs of these babies and children is just, it's just, the lack of humanity is staggering. So if nothing else, everybody, excuse me, has to vote. Everybody has to vote in November. And if you, and get everyone you know to vote, because the only way that this is going to change dramatically is by there being a change in the regime in November. So so Bay Area Border Relief, we're on Facebook, and we have a website, and we're always taking contributions. We not only help with needed supplies, but we also help with legal aid and legal assistance for people at the border, as well as that have relocated here to the San Francisco Bay Area. We used to say, my goodness, just if we could just get across the border, and then life is still not easy for the asylum seeker once they get into the US. But we compare what it's like to be held in Matamoros without the ability to come across. It makes life here make it not easy, but certainly easier, because at least they have the plan in place. So we are happy to be part of the collaborative, happy to be part of Dignity Village, and we're not going anywhere. We're continuing to stay with this, to stay with Sister and the Tias and Abuelas and RCM and GRM and Team Brownsville, so that we can be here to provide some level of care and love until this ends. Thank you.
Thank you, Lily, so much. And you know, it is so important to think about, how do we, right now, all of you that are here, we're so grateful. How do we combine activism and also relief at the same time? You know, folks right now are really suffering at this very moment, what they're living through. And the hurricane was a huge situation that happened. And so we go back and forth between helping them in real time and then trying to fight this effort, which all of you being here today really makes a difference. And we hope that at the end you use your voice and will, you know, activism to try to push for change. We want to introduce someone very special today. His name is Jorge Armando Sanchez Abreu. Jorge is 31-year-old Venezuelan national who migrated to the United States after facing political persecution in Venezuela. Jorge was forced to wait in Mexico after seeking asylum in the United States because of the Migrant Protection Protocol. And this protocol is this MPP program that we're speaking about is a United States program that forces migrants seeking asylum to wait in Mexico for their immigration hearings, which is what Sister Norma explained, that have now been waiting for a year, living in tents, living in some of the worst conditions you can imagine. In 2005, Jorge received a bachelor's degree in science and later a law degree from the Universidad Bicentenaria de Aragua in Venezuela. Jorge has advocated for basic fundamental human rights and was involved in political activism in Venezuela, for which he faced political repression. He was forced to flee his country with his wife and daughter in order to save their lives. Jorge is now in California, and I think Jorge's voice is so important in this conversation, because it's only been a few months that he has left the MPP process, and he's talking daily with families just like everyone here that are in MPP. So I'm gonna translate for Jorge, and he will be speaking in Spanish. Jorge.
Hola, buenos días a todos. Bueno, muchísimas gracias primero a la doctora Belinda Arriaga por su invitación a esta conversación. Creo que esta conferencia es muy importante. Muchas personas están alzando su voz por el tema que estamos hablando, que es el MPP. Considero que una palabra muy adecuada que va con el MPP es que el MPP es algo cruel. Es un proceso...
Jorge, me das un minuto, tomas un pauso para que traduzca, okay? So thank you so much for having me here today. It's really important. I'm glad to be able to be with you all to talk about MPP. The MPP process is one that is cruel.
Bueno, es un proceso lento. Yo tuve la oportunidad junto con mi hija y mi esposa y mi hija de salir de Venezuela, bueno, por salvar nuestras vidas, por situaciones políticas. Llegamos a México en el 2019, justamente en julio, cuando implementaron la política del MPP.
I was in the MPP process with my daughter and wife, and I had to flee my country. And I actually got to Mexico right when the MPP program was implemented in July of last year.
Bueno, digamos que fue algo como que nos tomó por sorpresa en ese momento porque no sabíamos nada, ¿no? Lo que era el proceso del MPP porque estaba empezando.
We didn't know anything about this process. It took us as a complete surprise. We didn't know that this was happening.
Sin embargo, en ese momento había muchísimas personas en la frontera. Se calculaba que en la frontera completa de México a Estados Unidos había aproximadamente 70,000 migrantes en el MPP,
70,000 en todas las fronteras.
en toda la frontera completa.
So across the whole borders, there was about 70,000 people trying to flee, asking for asylum at that time.
El proceso del MPP es un proceso engorroso, es un proceso donde se te atraviesan muchísimas piedras en el camino. El MPP es el agotamiento, es el cansancio, es es algo que te hace que te rindas.
The MPP program it puts a lot of barriers in your path of like stones that you have to cross, but it's exhausting. It has fatigued us, and it's undescribable. I think is some of the ways that.
Bueno, principalmente la migración de varios países tiene como que su tema primordial, ¿no? Pero digamos que la mayoría de las familias lo que estamos buscando es tener una vida bonita y poder desarrollar nuestra vida normalmente.
Our journey, our reason for being here is to come and have a good life and contribute and be, productive.
Cuando tú buscas un programa de protección en Estados Unidos, el MPP, digamos que es como que la barrera, ¿no? Para que no puedas estar en el territorio mexicano, para que el territorio americano no te preste la protección que tú necesitas en ese momento.
When you're coming fleeing to the United States, the MPP is like a wall that is a barrier for you to be able to come in and ask for protection, ask for asylum safely.
Sumado que son mujeres solas, mujeres embarazadas, personas discapacitadas, personas de la tercera edad, personas que han sufrido muchísimas cosas y muchísimas adversidades en sus países.
There's mothers coming, single mothers, mothers with children, seniors, folks that are disabled, so many that are suffering the danger and violence in their countries that are coming.
Y lo primero que hace el MPP es enviarte a México. ¿Sabes? Sabemos que no es un secreto que México es uno de los países más peligrosos de Latinoamérica.
The first thing that happens when you're an MPP is they send you back to Matamoros, Mexico. And we know that this is one of the most dangerous areas. It's not a secret.
México es uno de los países donde hay más delincuencia organizada, donde hay más corrupción y muchísimos temas que están pasando ahorita en México, ¿no? Y eso lo sabe el gobierno de los Estados Unidos, lógico.
United States government knows what's happening there, and it's not a secret. They're very aware of what's happening.
Sin embargo, bueno, ellos implementan esta política, ¿no? Te mandan a México y en México tú tienes que esperar tu proceso de asilo político completo en México.
So now they send us back to Mexico, and you have to wait there the whole time while you go through your process of political asylum, asking for protection.
Ellos te dicen que son 3 cortes que tú tienes que presentarte en el puente. La primera corte es donde te imputan los delitos por haber pisado territorio americano sin tener un documento legal que lo permita, ¿no? La segunda corte es para consignar tus papeles, tu planilla de solicitud de asilo y, bueno, tus pruebas. Y la tercera corte es cuando tú hablas con el juez y defiendes tu caso. Yo tuve 8 cortes, no 3.
And he explains that there's a court process that is supposed to be 3 different court hearings that you go to. And he's explaining that he had 8 court hearings that the system is not working the way that it says it does, which we will hear from our attorneys later today.
Sumado al maltrato, ¿no? Que te dan todos los funcionarios, ¿no? Te ven como que eres un animal, como que no eres una persona igual que ellos, no sé.
And going through these court processes and the whole system, they see you as an animal. They see you as an other, and they don't treat you equal like everyone else.
Pareciera que el gobierno de los Estados Unidos hizo una elección de sus funcionarios para poder integrar el MPP.
And it seems like the United States, you know, with the election and everything, this was their plan to implement this MPP process.
Yo diría que personas con el corazón bien malo, ¿no?
With really a really bad heart to be able to do this to people.
Yo personalmente tuve en mi quinta corte una situación particular con mi esposa porque mi esposa estaba embarazada.
Personally, I want to share in my fifth court a story that happened to my wife who was pregnant.
Sin embargo, con la ley que implementó Trump de no tolerancia, ni mujeres embarazadas, ni personas discapacitadas, ni nadie pasa por el MPP que no cumpla su proceso, ¿no?
That Trump implemented in this MPP process a no tolerance process, which means that there's no relief for women that are pregnant, mothers with babies, nothing like that.
Mi esposa tuvo una situación particular, ella tenía 2 niños en el estómago y bueno, por situaciones médicas, situaciones que escaparon de nuestras manos, tuvo una situación justamente un día en la corte, o sea, estábamos en el territorio americano, la llevaron a un médico, sin embargo la trataron como una delincuente, no dieron ningún tipo de información, le dijeron que todo estaba bien.
So my wife, what is explaining that his wife was pregnant with twins. And on the US side, during his actual court process, his wife had sudden pains in a really bad situation. They took her to the doctor and they treated her with no information. They didn't give her any information, give her any support.
Y luego que hicimos otros exámenes, que fuimos regresados a México, hicimos otros exámenes por nuestra parte, pudimos percatar de que sí había pasado algo, ¿no? Sin embargo, bueno, gracias a Dios, uno de los niños está bien y todo está bien.
And it wasn't until a little bit later that they were able to go back to Mexico. And when they got returned back to the MPP process, that was during their court, that they were able to do some other studies because they felt that something was wrong. And they did find out that she had lost one of the babies and, she kept one baby.
Ahí considero que son personas que tienen una mentalidad muy fuerte, ¿no? Para no poder prestar una ayuda a niños o personas que son vulnerables, ¿sabes? Niños inocentes de 3, 4 años, niño que está en la barriga, que no sabe qué es lo que está pasando, ¿sabes?
I feel like you have to have such a, what it says, like a strong mind, but probably like more like a cold spirit to be able to treat people like this, and little children, 3 years old, babies, like that you can have, watch this happen.
Yo estuve particularmente en el campamento de Matamoros, en Tamaulipas, en México.
I lived in the camp in Matamoros, in Tamaulipas, Mexico.
Tuve la oportunidad también de conocer un compañero mío cubano que él, por situaciones que escaparon de sus manos, él se contagió de dengue hemorrágico.
I met and made a friend from Cuba that was infected with dengue.
No se pudo presentar en la corte, no se pudo presentar en el puente el día de la corte.
He was, dengue is like a pretty bad illness, infection, and he couldn't present himself at the court or during the court on that day.
Sin embargo, al momento de su recuperación, gracias a Dios, él se presentó con todos sus documentos, avalando su situación que escapa de sus manos, porque ya es una situación de salud, ¿no?
When he was finally better and had recuperated, he went to present himself with his papers and evidence, of his illness and that he had recuperated.
Y yo estaba ese día ahí, al lado de mi compañero, en las oficinas ahí del MPP, en la frontera, en territorio americano, cuando los oficiales le dijeron que eso no era para ellos darle otra oportunidad de presentarse en la corte. Que de ahí se iba para Cuba, palabras textuales. De aquí te vas para Cuba. Y le pusieron las esposas delante de todos. Niños, mujeres, hombres.
And Jorge was in the court that day as a witness when they told him that that evidence of him, his illness, dengue, did not count for him to be able to present himself again. Being sick did not count, and that day he was going to be returned to Cuba in front of all the women and children that were there in that court that day.
Haciendo todo por lo legal, ¿no? Cabe acotar, haciendo todo por lo legal.
And he was doing everything the legal way. So when people ask, are they coming the legal way? This is the legal process.
Porque sabemos que hay otras alternativas que la gente también toma para entrar a los Estados Unidos. Sin embargo, muchísimas personas quieren estar en Estados Unidos legalmente, ¿no? Que eso es lo que se quiere. Pero creo que el gobierno no toma en consideración eso, ¿no? Y lo que hace es alimentar a las mafias mexicanas, porque todos los migrantes lo que están es propensos a cualquier situación en México, cualquier situación mala.
And that the migrant families there are very vulnerable to whatever situation can happen with cartel. There's just a great deal of vulnerability there in the MPP program and where they're living. Jorge, le voy a decir gracias por el momento. Vamos a dar paso a los otros y luego vamos a regresar a hacer más preguntas, ¿ok?
Muchísimas gracias.
Agradezco todo su corazón para decirnos la historia. So thank you so much, Jorge, for sharing your story, your heart, being honest as a witness and what he lived through this terrible situation. And we will be hearing more from Jorge. I'm going to turn to Thelma Garcia as we listen to Jorge talking about the legal barriers, the challenges. We have Thelma, who is an amazing attorney on the ground in South Texas. We've met Thelma. She's been working with some of our families, and we were actually there with her during a time when the Ninth Circuit, Thelma, ruled MPP unconstitutional, but it stayed, and so there's a stay, and now it's being moved up to the court systems. But we were there that day when this happened, and Thelma went up and fought her way to the front of the line with Border Patrol agents to try and get some of her clients through, and unfortunately was turned away. But Thelma is definitely on the ground. She's been an attorney for 41 years in the state of Texas. She's licensed in the United States Federal Court and in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. She practices immigration with a concentration in deportation and removal, detention, asylum, and visas. She's a board member of various community organizations in Texas and has contributed to pro bono legal work a lot, Thelma, gracias, on Zero Tolerance Separated Families for the Together and Free Nonprofit Organization. Gracias, Thelma, por estar aquí.
Thank you, and I really appreciate your invitation here. Obviously, what's needed in all our issues is exposure, and being able to do this with so many people who know a lot more people that will be sending the message out to everyone. The situation obviously is worse than when you and I met down here, and you're aware of that, of course, Belinda. I did want to give just a brief history, I guess, through the Trump administration as to the different policies that he's implemented down here on the border. As Jorge said, we had the children separation, parent-children separation back in the spring and summer of 2018. And obviously, everyone saw through the media how horrible the treatment was of this separation. It's caused a lot of trauma, a lot of psychological issues for the children as well as the parents. And we're still, I represent several of those families, and we are still fighting to try to get some kind of normalization for the families, for the children. They're still having a lot of psychological issues concerning the separation. Right after Trump implemented that program, he then implemented the program with where the conditions, well, I guess at the hieleras, that's when we started to see the conditions at the hieleras where the people were being held, how deplorable and how horrible all those conditions were. Again, we had to take recourse through the federal system. We went to federal court locally down here in Brownsville. We were not able to, we lost our case, but actually we brought a lot of exposure to the issue as well. People that we named in our lawsuits were eventually released within 12 hours after we filed the lawsuit. The person was no longer at the hilera, but they were being moved to detention centers. Once they got moved to the detention centers, they were given the right of going through the credible fear interview and explaining to an asylum officer what their fear was of returning back home. And if they passed their interview, then they would be able to go through the removal process, the normal immigration process of seeing a judge and presenting their evidence on their asylum. If they lost, then they had the opportunity to see a judge briefly for about 10, 15 minutes and explain their fear of returning. Most of the judges denied this. It was called a review on the credible fear. They were mainly denied by the judges. Once denied, that's it. There's really not much else to do. I would go back to the asylum office if it was denied, and I would try to impress upon a supervisor in the asylum office that actually both the initial asylum officer interview and that the court were wrong. And I wanted them to review everything again. We were able to overturn some of them, but if at the end of the day, all this was denied, people were being deported back to their home country. There wasn't any other review, no other legal thing that you could do for the immigrant refugee. After that program, well, like I said, after the people were placed in the hieleras and we were able to get some of the names, we were able to get those people out. Those that were not named were obviously removed. They had no recourse whatsoever. Then after that came the MPP program, which is what Jorge was talking about, of which we all know the conditions out there are horrible, especially now with the pandemic and stuff. I fear that there might be some kind of infection out there and it's going to go rampant because they live in such horrible conditions back to back with each other. As somebody was describing during the hurricane how it went, there was just water running everywhere. It ruined it. Their tents were all ruined. That some of them have been replaced, but again, I mean, that's no place for a human to be living at. We do have several people, clients, and some of which have come through Belinda's and the organization, and that we continue to try to see how we can do for them. At the MPP level, as we all know, that program is pretty much stopped. We have had several of our last hearings, or the merits as they're called, the trial on their asylum, canceled. And they seem to be canceled every time it's set up for a hearing. And this is all due to the pandemic, according to the government. I've got some cases of people who have been there a year and a half already. And some of these cases have been moved up to 2021. So that means that they continue to live under those same deplorable conditions. And this is what Sister Pimentel was talking about. Because all these cases are taking forever, because the conditions are so inhumane, people are starting to cross the river again. Right now, I've got two families that crossed in about 2 o'clock in the morning. They used their mattress, the rubber mattress, to throw themselves into the river and try to float across. These two families, the adult female was pregnant. One of them has already given birth, and they are living at the shelter right now with us at Sister Pimentel's shelter. The other family is in Brownsville, and they're at a different shelter there. the shelter only allows the people a 30-day stay, so they have to look for lodging elsewhere. I have filed changes of venue for these families so that they can go and travel to their final destination. We don't have anything yet from the courts. They were just filed recently. But I understand that most of the cases of people who were placed in MPP and then crossed back in here, the changes of venue have been denied. In some cases, if they weren't able to present themselves in court because they crossed the river, they have orders of removal, and it's really difficult to reopen those cases. A few cases were venued, but I understand from other areas like maybe San Diego, but not from the Brownsville area. We haven't had any success that I know of there concerning those cases. After so anyway, those cases are still ongoing, and people are really having a hard time living and having to wait out God knows how many more months. After that, immigration through the Trump administration came up with some other programs. They called it the PACER program. And this particular PACER, people from Central America who came into the country, were given a credible fear interview like within 2 or 3 days of their entry. They weren't allowed to make any phone calls to the family members. Family members are usually the ones who try to get counsel to try to help them out. They would get the phone call after the interview was done and after it was denied. If we were able to catch that on time, we would then ask to appeal that, and then we would have a judge review that. The judge that was reviewing all those cases down in this area were judges out of Otay, New Mexico. All those cases were denied as well. After that, obviously, they were going to get deported. They also had a program called the HARP, which was mainly geared towards the Mexican who was asking for asylum. And that was pretty much went by the same way, a fast removal. After that came the ACA, which is the one had to do with the people traveling into, crossing into Mexico and asking for asylum in the US. The US was sending them back to Guatemala so that they could ask for asylum there if they stepped on Guatemala coming into the US. And then they would have to ask for asylum in Mexico before they could ask for asylum in the US. I'm not sure, I don't believe that those are being implemented anymore because now we have a new program. And this program is of course based on Title 42, which was implemented or drafted up in 1944. And it's got to do with the pandemic, that the Surgeon General decides that there is a pandemic and the government or the president agrees with this and that it's going to infect people in our country, they don't have to let people in. And the president has the say-so as to how long this lasts. So at this point, people that are coming into the country, even though they're asking for asylum, they're routed really quickly, maybe within 24 to 48 hours, and they're sent back to their home country if they can get them on a plane to send them back. At the start of this, Guatemala was accepting and so was El Salvador. But my understanding now is that the US places them like in a 14-day quarantine. And then if they're clear, then they get put on a plane to get sent back to their home country. We have had, I believe this was about 2 weeks ago when we started to see that the Hampton Inn was being used as a detention center, mainly for the unaccompanied minors, so that they could be removed. Again, the unaccompanied minor was not allowed to make a phone call to contact their family members. Obviously, they were then denied also their right to seek counsel and get representation. What they did with those children, they then moved them to Karnes City Detention Center. We thought that was going to stop the use of the Hampton Inn. I believe Hilton owns the Hampton Inn, and they came out with a statement that they were not going to allow their properties to be used as detention centers. But I got a call late yesterday about a family, a mother and two children, minor children, that are at the Hampton Inn. And they were told that they were going to get removed. Now, I was able to speak to the mother yesterday, and I told her that she needed to ask for an asylum, to ask for an interview. She asked for the interview, and it seems like today she got what they call the non-refoulement interview, which is also accessible to the people in the MPP program, meaning if you fear returning back to the country of Mexico, waiting for your asylum hearing in the US, you can speak to an asylum officer. And if the asylum officer feels like you are in danger, then they should allow you to come into the country. They parole you in, and you can continue your process in the US. But those grants are very far few and in between. They really haven't granted too many of those. At this point in this particular family that I'm speaking about, we don't have a decision yet. Usually the decision is made within 24 hours and they're advised. Obviously, because we're not the attorneys of record, we don't get any of that kind of information. The people don't even have A numbers. The A number generally throughout history has been given to people who come into the country if they're not citizens and they're apprehended by immigration. Right now, they're not being given A numbers, so it's very difficult to locate people within the system. And it's all by intent and designed by the Trump administration, so that people are not able to speak to anyone that can help them. We had several people, just like Jorge was explaining, about people being attacked, being kidnapped, going through a lot of severe torture in Mexico. We've presented cases like this in the non-refoulement interviews with the asylum officers. They've all been denied. One particular case that came through Jennifer, who's done some wonderful work out there in the shelters in Reynosa, where the State Department says do not travel to Reynosa because it's very dangerous. You will find Jennifer there helping out. And she brought this case to our attention. It was a young woman and her child who were en route to their interview actually through the court, to the court under the MPP program. En route, they get kidnapped by the cartel. She gets abused by the cartel as well. We presented a motion to reopen with all our evidence and statements, and they denied the motion to reopen. And so now we're having to appeal that as well. We got another call just, I think it was this morning or late evening also, of a family from Nicaragua. And we thought the MPP program had stopped. I'm not sure what kind of a program it is. I reached out to CBP and inquired about the family to see if they would release them here into the state so that we could begin the process of either credible fear or just a removal process. And he informed us, CBP attorney informed me and said that the people were being sent to Mexico. We're not sure what's going to happen there. It sounds like they may be placed in the MPP program, which we thought was no longer functioning other than the people that were already in MPP, but maybe they're starting that up again. I got another call from a young woman from Guatemala today, and I spoke to her. She's pregnant, 7 months pregnant. Border Patrol took her back into Mexico and had her turn herself in, obviously, to the Mexican authorities, immigration. Immigration authorities refused her because she was 7 months pregnant. So she was sent back into the US, and Border Patrol had to pick her up. At this point, we don't know what they're going to do with her. She doesn't know what they're going to do with her. Maybe she'll get sent back on the next plane to Guatemala. We're not sure what's happening. So everything is, you never know what's going to happen here. We never know when the policies change. You're not certainly given any information concerning any of this. And the bottom line is people are being, rights are being abused. They don't have the right to counsel. They don't have the right to contact their family members. And so what you guys are doing is great, and we just need to keep passing the word on.
Thank you, Thelma. Thank you for sharing the legal part of this. And I think another reminder that these families are not coming here just because they want to come. They're coming here because of danger, very serious situations, fleeing trauma, fleeing violence, fleeing death. We've heard the stories, we've seen the families, we've seen the evidence. We've been able to help Thelma translate some of the evidence for families, and it's heartbreaking to see what's happening, and that the U.S. is turning our back on them at a time when we should be the guide for human rights. So with that, I want to introduce Jennifer Harberry. She's an attorney, human rights activist, and advocate for farm worker families in the Rio Grande Valley. She's written a book, Bridge to Courage, Life Stories of Guatemalan Compañeros and Compañeras, and also a foreword by Noam Chomsky, photography by Sherilyn Borgren. Also wrote Searching for Everardo, A Story of Love, War, and the CIA in Guatemala, and Truth, Torture, and the American Way. She received a Letelier Moffitt Human Rights Award in 1997. She shared the Cavallo Award for Moral Courage with Richard Nucio. And Jennifer, as we welcome you to the panel, I also want to put out a very important question that someone has asked as we hear just all the legal barriers. If you can mention, if you know if there's going to be a quick process when Biden is elected. So Jennifer, thank you for being with us today. Can you hear us, Jennifer? I think you're on mute.
Here we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Jennifer, for being here.
Yeah, I started by saying thank you to everybody and saying how happy I am to be on any panel that has Sister Norma and Thelma and everybody else that I'm seeing the names listed for. I cannot speak to Mr. Biden's immigration plan at this point, just because I need to see what he actually does if and when he becomes president. Under President Obama, we had very, very serious problems with immigration changes and stuff, although nothing like what we're seeing today under our fearless leader, President Trump. What I'd like to do is give 3 short stories with what I've been seeing in Reynosa, since that tends to get left out of a lot of things. What I should say first is that almost anyone that comes up from Central America or Africa or whatever, they've been told very clearly, and that if they talk about what the cartels and gangs did to them or their family, or the fact that they burned their village down or whatever, that the next day someone will go either for them or for whoever got left behind. You get severely punished if you speak out against gang violence, or army violence, or security officer violence. The retribution is immediate to somebody. One young man fled after he was told they would kill his baby if he didn't start working with them that night in Honduras. So he fled that afternoon with his wife and his baby. And when he got to northern Mexico, he called home for his mom and little brother and sister, and they'd all been bludgeoned to death. They were already gone. So that's what people are dealing with. And that's why so many people will say, oh, I just want to come to this country and work hard and lead a better, and have my children lead a better life. That's not why they've come here. That, of course, would be nice if it would happen, but they have to run and they cannot talk. So in Reynosa, after 4 or 5 interviews with people and after they got to know me, I found that the reality is that half to 80% are being kidnapped by the cartels or by Mexican immigration or by Mexican military forces who hold them for ransom. or sell them. It's a very shocking level of violence, but it's what's really happening and that we don't hear much about. I want to give 3 anecdotes about what I've seen come out of Reynosa and during different stages of the Trump administration. One is a young woman who fled because she was going to be raped or killed if she didn't become this cartel leader's mistress. She fled with an 8-year-old daughter. Their van was chased by the gangs into Reynosa and flipped over and smashed. The daughter was crushed to death. The young woman was left with a smashed pelvis and a huge gash around her neck and was in the hospital for quite a while. When she recovered, she was on a walker. She hobbled across the bridge to enter legally, presented herself at the U.S. port of entry according to the statutes, and said, "I'm in danger. I need to ask for asylum." And they said basically, "Oh, we don't do that here anymore," and sent her back. She hobbled back across the bridge to the other side and re-entered Reynosa, and at the foot of the bridge, she was kidnapped. She was gone for more than a month. Her dad was finally able to pay the ransom. We got her back across the bridge and into the United States, but she was detained even though she had a severe medical condition, had never committed a crime, and had many US citizen relatives. The denial of parole skyrocketed under Trump immediately. As a result, she was in filthy conditions for more than a year. Her surgical site reopened and her leg was not given proper treatment, so she nearly died of an infection. At that point, when she was in a wheelchair screaming, she was released to us. It took 3 surgeries, major surgeries in another area to save her life and save her leg. Story number 2, a young woman comes north as MPP just gets started, also fleeing the gangs in Honduras who told her they were coming for her because of a relative who was a police officer. They had just shot her mother-in-law to death by way of example. She fled all the way north, almost got to the border near Reynosa, and their group was grabbed by gangs who hauled them off to a secret place, a house, a safe house, quote unquote, and they were told they were going to be sold for their organs if they didn't get the money immediately from relatives. The relatives paid really fast. But as they were about to leave, another gang showed up and there was an enormous shootout that was like blasting the walls to pieces in the building they were in. So they all lay down on top of their kids and waited till it was over, then ran to the river, got across, turned themselves into Border Patrol and said, help us, we just got across. We're gonna die over there and we're gonna die back home. We need asylum. And they were given a court date and said, MPP is the new program, go back. And they begged and pleaded and wept, all of them, explaining what had happened. She got sent back to Matamoros at the beginning of the tent city there. And she was kidnapped by gangs again with her 3-year-old son. And this time she was gang raped in front of the child. She was then in Reynosa at a shelter for a while where she did feel safe, except during a Christmas break for a party, a large group of church people came in with gifts. And the group included one of her kidnappers who was posing as a church person. She's now in a very small place with a friend that took her in. She's quarantined because of Corona. I made arrangements to try to get her to my friends in Costa Rica, but Corona hit so quickly and so fast, now we can't get her out of Mexico into the United States or into Costa Rica, so she's stuck there. And she told me yesterday she and her housemate are gravely ill. I hope she lives. This is what we are sowing. What the hell are we gonna reap? The third example is a young African pastor from Uganda. He did not fit into MPP. He also had done human rights and voting rights campaigns in Uganda, which resulted in a torture session where 2 of his fingers were cut off, among other things. He also presented himself at the U.S. port of entry and legally requested asylum and was put in Port Isabel. He's never committed a crime, and he had many offers of sponsorship, and he's a pastor. They denied him parole, nonetheless, part of this ongoing program of denying everyone parole. He's diabetic, but had kept that under control for a very long time. Once he was in Port Isabel, they stopped testing him every day and started testing him once every 3 months. Also cut way back on his medications and changed that all around. And The diet he gets, sometimes labeled special diet, on a special diet, different colored plate, is the white bread bologna sandwiches and mashed potatoes. By January, his blood sugar shot past 550. He could have gone into a coma. He has boils throughout his body because his immune system is down so far. He is blind just about. He has no vision in one eye and a little bit of vision left in the other due to diabetes-caused cataracts, which they have not sent him to surgery for. We begged and pleaded and went to court to get him out during the COVID epidemic because he could die of COVID. He apparently had COVID sometime during the last month or so while he was in there. They just didn't test him. So when they took a blood test, they found out that he was negative, but that his white blood cell count is completely destroyed. It's near zero. He has no immune system. If he gets a common cold, he could die of pneumonia. Then he started getting massive pains through his sides. And apparently they told him upstairs, well, that could indicate kidney failure. And they were going to send him for testing, but then they didn't. They're doing some in-house urine and blood samples and have refused to tell him what's going on. He now has body-wide pain. We have a petition, or not a petition. There's a sign-on letter coming out of McGovern's office right now. James McGovern's office on the Hill. It's making the rounds in Congress for signatures, and we're trying to get him out on medical parole. I'm a backup sponsor. But down here, we're killing people every day.
Jennifer, thank you so much for your words. And you know what? I know that it's really, when we hear these stories, you know, sometimes it's just, it's painful, right? And at the same time, what you're doing today is being a witness to so many and telling us the stories that so many cannot speak for themselves to us. So thank you. And we will, I'm sure, get back with you with another question.
Well, I'm going to go run hide behind Thelma pretty soon.
Thank you.
I need more help from her later today, so I'm glad she's on the panel too. I may need to sign off. I'm getting some emergency calls, but I'll try to jump right back on.
Thank you, Jennifer. And I just want to point out to everyone that there is a chat going on. I appreciate all of you that have attended today and that are listening in and have questions. I'm sure we will not be able to get to everyone's questions today, but I do have a couple questions that I'm going to start with. And Sister Norma, if we can start with you, I wanted to ask you, Sister Norma, because you're, you know, definitely out there in the community. What do you think when you talk to the children and to the families, and when you feed them and you sit with them, what do they tell you, Sister Norma? What do you hear? Like, what is it that you know, if you had to bring a message to this group, what is it that they tell you?
Well, thank you, Belinda. Actually, just yesterday, I had a group of women and children came to meet with me because they wanted to really voice their cry to me so that I can be that voice for them, because they say this is enough is enough. You know, we don't want donations. We don't want you to make this camp better. We're so unsafe, so fearful for our lives. This needs to stop. How else can we say that? If we really want to help them, they want us to hear them. Please get us out of here. It's not safe to be here. If I go back to my country, I know it's a for sure death. And the women were saying that, you know, and this camp is not safe. You know, there's so many stories that we're even afraid to say them because of what can happen to us if people start to know that we're speaking up, you know. And I think that we have to stop trying to fix something that is broken and that is hurting these families that are there hurting, and so many people are hurting. And I mean, one little boy, 15-year-old, was raped by the river, you know, and this girl just had a miscarriage and she was bleeding off, you know, and we have to go see her because nobody's caring for her in any way. And so many women have lost their babies because they're pregnant and they're not having the right proper care. And so, I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And when is enough enough, you know? When do we need to kind of make it our problem and start to do something about it? You know, this MPP must stop.
Sister Norma, thank you. I also want to point out to the group, and I don't know if you want to add to this, Sister Norma, that, you know, when we think about the U.S. created this MPP policy, and they have put, you know, all of these families in Mexico, they're at the border, and this was our policy. Mexico agreed to it. Yes, they did. However, one of the most important things I think about is the people that are on the ground helping the families. Is U.S. money is not coming in to support none of that. So there's no U.S. money coming in, or, you know, it's Sister Norma's group, Team Brownsville group, Tias and Abuelas group, and, you know, RCM, Bay Area Border Relief. So there's just these amazing groups that are on the ground with Sister Norma at the helm, providing this, all the resources there. And I think about, Sister Norma, I don't know if you ever think about what happens if these resources weren't there. What would happen if these groups weren't there? I mean, we as the U.S. aren't thinking about the human rights violations and then all of what it would take to get them these resources. But also, I mean, is that something?
You know, Belinda, initially I struggled with the idea of resolving the camp situation because I said if we resolve it, the United States feel like, well, it's working, you know, why should I even change that policy? It's actually a successful policy, you know. And so but the truth of the matter is that when you see the suffering of the families and the children, you have no choice but to act and to do something about it, and to provide, to give them the, like you said, the food and the restrooms and the showers that were non-existent, and the water. You know, it's, even to this day, as much water as we take them, it's never enough, you know. Especially if somebody's ill, somebody's with diabetic and other issues, you know, we can never do enough for them to make it right, you know. And it's like trying to put a Band-Aid on a very serious problem. And so we will relieve some of the efforts, of the needs, but truly, we're not resolving anything with the help that we're doing. And I know that the Mexican authorities there in Matamoros are doing some, of course, with our initiative and the work of so many groups trying to do something, has really put them on the spot to also try to do something themselves. And so they are putting some effort, but definitely not enough to respond to the needs of these families the way they need to be cared for.
Yes, thank you, sister. Thank you so much. Jorge, I want to ask you the same question. Si nos puedes decir, Jorge, usted está hablando diario con sus amigos allá. You know, tienes meses que has llegado del campamento. ¿Qué es lo que ellos te dicen? ¿Qué es lo que usted quisiera decir como voz de ellos aquí a este grupo? Y déjame traducir esa pregunta. So I'm asking Jorge, you know, it's been a few months that he's been out of the MPP camp, and he's in communication with them every day, not just one time a day, but all day long, you know, on WhatsApp, talking to them, encouraging them, just like many of us are. And my question is for Jorge, what is it that they tell him, and what is it that he would like to share with you all about their voices?
Bueno, sí, Belinda, ya como tú dices, tengo 5 meses aquí en los Estados Unidos, gracias a Dios. Todos los días lo agradezco. Todos los días tengo comunicación con mis hermanos. Somos una familia, me considero que son familia por todas las situaciones que vivimos allá.
I have 5 months that I've been out of MPP, and every day I'm talking to them. Every day I'm in communication with them, and I consider them my brothers now, all the time that we live together there.
Bueno, no se dice nada positivo, Belinda, puras cosas tristes, ¿no? Principalmente la situación de los niños. Ya los niños tienen 1 año y y algo sin estudiar, cosas que, o sea, es algo triste, como unos niños le van a parar la educación a unos niños inocentes.
That, everything he hears from them right now is just really sad, nothing positive. And one of the things is the children have been a year without school. Imagine a year without going to school. That's so wrong.
Sumado a todas las condiciones en que se encuentra, que cada día es peor, las condiciones, no hay agua, no hay luz, viven en unas carpas, viven en un tierrero, viven al lado del río. Hace poco el río se desbordó, se llevó las carpas.
And the conditions are getting worse every day. There's not enough electricity, not enough water. The tents get destroyed with a hurricane recently. So many of them, were destroyed, and it's just continues.
De verdad que se necesitan muchísimas voces, levantar la voz. Y bueno, le doy gracias a todos los activistas que trabajan, a la madrecita Telma, a la señora Telma, a la madre, a Team Brosville, a Lalas, a todas las organizaciones que trabajan en conjunto, porque de verdad que en las condiciones que se encuentran todas esas familias son unas condiciones muy, muy, muy tristes.
The conditions that people are living in is very, very sad. And I want to give thanks to those that are advocating for them, all the groups that are fighting on behalf of them, because of the conditions are so hard right now.
El agotamiento psicológico es muy grande y grave. A todas las personas que se encuentran ahí, niños, niñas, hombres, personas adultas, todos.
The mental health trauma, the fatigue, exhaustion, the psychological trauma of what everyone is living there with, children, mothers, fathers, everyone is definitely taking an impact on people. It affects everyone there. Gracias, Jorge. Si piensas en otra cosa, voy a dar un minuto para que la gente te hacen preguntas en un ratito, okay? Thelma, would you like to take 2 minutes? We're coming to time, and I want to leave a few minutes for questions and answers, but Thelma, is there a message that you think that you would want to share, what the people would want this group to know?
Certainly. In spite of the fact that what we've done as the group for our brothers and sisters across in Matamoros, obviously we've all talked about more help being needed. Do we continue doing it? Yes or no? We don't have a choice but to help. And obviously everything lies with Congress, so we have to push there harder. We have to get everyone out there to vote. Hopefully the new administration will be a better administration. I figure it can't get any worse, so it's going to be better. I don't know if it's going to come to the point that we will be satisfied with what they do, but they certainly have the power to change it. And so I would just say, make sure we all get out, take everyone out there to vote or mail in, whatever needs to be done. But let's not forget that and I know you guys are not going to forget, but let's keep putting the word out that we need to continue helping the people one way or the other. Like Jorge was saying, there's a lot of mental health issues. There's obviously a lot of financial need as well. They need the food, they need the shelter, because otherwise they're there by themselves. And the U.S. is not going to come to their aid at this point. And Mexico's not happy having them there either. I've been told by some of my clients that are out there that when they run to Mexican police to ask for help or to make reports, they make remarks to them that Central Americans or people that are staying there with the MPP program are not wanted. So we need to resolve this as soon as we can.
Thank you, Thelma. Lily, can I ask you what if you had to speak for the children there, and I think that's always a big, I don't know what weighs heavily on my heart, but what do you think about, what the children are experiencing? And I think it's really important that sometimes I've heard comments like, oh, well, their parents shouldn't have brought them. But I have to tell you that the children have told us that they're very scared back home too, that they understand the danger that they're fleeing from, that they're in this as well. And so what would you like to share in these next 2 minutes about the children?
One of the biggest issues that I have about the children is that people say they're resilient. You know, it doesn't, things don't affect children like they affect us. And that's just not true. How anybody can think that a child who's living in a tent camp, who doesn't go to school and maybe did go to school before they left, and they hear gunshots, they hear violence, they see it, they've witnessed it. Even Jennifer's story about the 3-year-old, these children are so affected, and it may be irreversible at some point for it to continue to go on for so long. So and a lot of people have said this, we provide teddy bears, we provide food, but that's just not enough anymore. You know, a child can hold on to a teddy bear for dear life, but that's not going to change what's happening to them emotionally. And we all have a responsibility, because these are our neighbors that are just. And I urge people to send a note to the Hispanic Caucus, send a note to your congresspeople. So many of our leaders that are on the right side of this issue all say there's so little that can be done right now. There's so little that can be done right now because of Trump, and it is an all-out effort. There's a special place in hell for Stephen Miller. I'll go on record right here to say that, as he's that awful human being who is basically writing, and how do he even comes up with this stuff? It's like the worst of a worst Disney movie. But anyway, I digress. I'm sorry. But we can all write to our congresspeople, write to the Hispanic Caucus, make a point to say this isn't okay. We can't keep waiting, because best case, we do win in November, and then January 20th, we get a new president. It's August. That's January. You know, for us in our homes, and we're eating and we're doing, like, we feel bad, but the reality is 6 months out of a 5-year-old's life is a huge amount of time. So I just urge everyone to have these children in the back of your mind always. I go to sleep at night thinking about all of their beautiful brown eyes that I have stared at and danced with and played with being at the border. But again, that's not getting them out of there. So vote, vote, vote. And write an email to the Hispanic Caucus, write to your congressperson. We need to make a stink and not just say, oh, look, we've gotten them water. There's not even enough water. But even if you do get them a drink, they're still there. Okay.
Thank you, Lily. Thank you. So, Sister Norma Diaz and Abuelas, if you're on here, Team Brownsville, Bay Area Border Relief, there are a lot of immediate things happening in families. And Thelma, Jennifer, I think Jennifer had to jump off, but if you can put into the chat, type into the chat how folks can reach you, donate to your organization. We do have to understand that we have to stop MPP. We have to move them out, and we need you all, like Lily said, to write to your representatives, write to the Hispanic Caucus. Get out there and move what you can. And at the same time, there are families that really need immediate help because of the conditions that are getting worse. And so let's work on both ends to make this happen. I have a question that says, mi pregunta es, ¿cuál sería existe algún plan para poder ofrecer un lugar a las personas en donde pueden esperar sus citas de una manera en mejores condiciones? Sister Norma, we also had that question coupled with another question that was sent in earlier to me by El Tribune about the UN. And he asked if he had heard about the UN helping with housing. Sister, do we have any information on that? I know that people are asking. I would wish that MPP would end and that we didn't have to worry about that. But it is a question people have. Is Sister Norma here? Did we lose her? I think we might have lost Sister Norma. Thelma, do you know about anything with the UN in terms of help right now?
I really don't. I have no idea what.
And I think it's important. That is the reality, right? Thelma, that UN, we have not seen a presence. Not Red Cross, not UN. We hear that they're on the peripheral somewhere, but I think that's something else that we should push for is definitely.
I could speak to that if I'm on.
Yes, hi Joyce.
I'm with Angry Tias and Abuelas. I think possibly Sister Norma is either muted or not still on the panel. UNHCR has had a presence for about a year in the Matamoros encampment. Are you able to hear me?
No.
No? But they've had a presence in the camp for approximately a year. They arrived soon after GRM, the medical facility, took up residence there. Helen Perry, the director of GRM, sent a report to the UN describing the appalling conditions and asking why they weren't present. And very soon thereafter, we had a large meeting in which about 5 UN representatives came from UNICEF and UNHCR, and gradually some efforts began to be present. They are not able to be present in the way that they are in many other countries because, as I understand it, Mexico has not really approved their presence in the camp, or Matamoros hasn't, and I'm not positive about that inner working there. But they are providing outreach for information about their integration program for immigrants in Monterrey. And I think some of the people maybe have even made their way to Monterrey to be involved in that. But most of the people do not want to leave the camp to go further inward to Mexico because their goal is to get across the border into the United States to apply to have their asylum cases processed. So they're stuck where they are, but some have made that decision and have gone further in to be served by UNHCR. And UNICEF did come into the camp before COVID. There was a presence of UNICEF and UNHCR trying to make some inroads and doing some important things, including now they're in the process of bringing portable, small building units to both Reynosa and Matamoros, not for the people to live in, but to provide services. So there is some presence.
Okay, thank you so much for stepping in and sharing that.
Sure.
We are at time. We have 2 more points to make. I want to give Jorge 1 minute. Jorge, 1 minuto para decir lo que te queda en su corazón que quieres compartir para el último mensaje hoy. And then Laura Garcia will be signing off for us. So Jorge, who has truly been a gift to the community where he's living now, and also his contribution to really being determined to keep the voices alive for his families. I would like for him to be able to share his last words with you all. Jorge, ¿qué es lo que le gustaría terminar este junta?
Bueno, me gustaría terminar con estas palabras. Me gustaría darle un mensaje. Primero que todo, muchísimas gracias a todas las personas que se encuentran aquí presentes. Muchísimas gracias al trabajo que está haciendo Lili Rey en la frontera, al trabajo que está haciendo Belinda Arriaga, la madrecita y la señora Telma, que también sé que está ayudando bastante. Gracias por sus conocimientos, que yo sé que valen oro. Y ella los está aportando a todas esas familias que verdaderamente lo necesitan. Por favor, le pido a todos que no los olvidemos, que tengamos presente en nuestras oraciones a todas esas familias que verdaderamente lo necesitan, porque todos somos seres humanos, y que gracias por la invitación.
Thank you so much for inviting us today. Thank you for all the advocates on the ground. And please continue to advocate and fight for them. Gracias, Jorge, por estar aquí con nosotros y por representar voces de sus hermanos allá. Thank you so much. Thelma, with that, I will say thank you to everyone for being here. Thank you to Thelma, thank you to Lily, Jennifer, to Jorge, and to Sister Norma. And I hope that you all can continue to really push this on the front lines as an issue that you take on, and we cannot afford to be silent. Every day that goes by, families are suffering, and we need your help today. So with that, thank you. And Laura, I will pass it on to you. Laura, you're on mute.
I was just saying thank you to you, Belinda, for doing such a wonderful job at moderating this panel. And thank you to all the panelists. They've done a wonderful job of letting us know what the situation is. And we are left with one thought, which we need a permanent solution to the problem. We would need to help as we can. We need to stop MPP. We need to get out to vote, and we need to get Trump out. We gotta keep the fight going for our brothers and sisters that are suffering right now at the border. I also wanted to let you guys know that we will publish a complete report once the series of panels are completed, and we intend to present the report to the United Nations later this year as part of the 72nd anniversary of the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. So it's everything that we're doing is towards making some change. Our next panel will be September 3rd. We're gonna be zooming to El Paso, Texas, and our host moderator will be Carlos Marentes from Sin Fronteras Organizing Project and Executive Director of the Border Project. And that's all. Thank you. Muchas gracias. Hasta la próxima.